next session is about how we build on the GovTech initiatives of the member states and also at an EU level. We've got a very, very interesting high-level panel, but doing the moderating for us, Max and I get to take a break, we're going to hand over to the very capable hands of Maciej Kuziemski, who is an affiliate at Harvard University's Berkman Klein Center for Internet and Society, and he is also the policy advisory lead at the Hyphen Group. So, Maciej, I'm really pleased that you're going to do this. I hope you've got lots of questions lined up. I know our audience has been really engaged over the last 2 days and presumably will be for your session as well. So take it away, introduce your speakers and have a wonderful conversation.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And thank you, Daniel, for setting the stage. We have a lot to discuss and less than an hour to go. So please bear with me. We have a really stellar panel with us today. Some of the biggest movers and shakers of European GovTech landscape. Idoia, Ortiz, the Artiñano, director and managing founder of the Public Lab at the IE University in Madrid. Arune, Matelyte, co-founder and manager of the GovTech Lab Lithuania. Robyn Scott, co-founder and CEO of Apolitical, a knowledge-sharing platform for policymakers. And Antoni, Rytel, deputy director of GovTech Polska program. Idoia, let's start with you. Running a Publictech lab at the IE University, you have a sort of helicopter view of recent developments in both Europe and Latin America. Now, I think it's impossible to abstract our conversation from the realities of the pandemic. So I'm wondering, what are some of the trends and tensions within the European GovTech space that you have observed over the last year and a half?
Okay, thank you so much for the opportunity of being here and discussing this amazing topic of tech for all of us. Well, I think that that overview, I mean, we have listened to Daniel. He has given us a lot of information, super agree with him in many, many things. Before speaking or talking about the GovTech today in Europe, I would like to go back 5 years ago to understand how rapid or quickly is developing this space. I mean, in 2016, we were seeing the first institutions, public institutions, start thinking about this and creating the first initiatives. For instance, the Civic Tech Lab from the Scottish government. It was in 2017 with the government of UK that created the GovTech Catalyst program and the GovTech Fund. So we have to think that it has been just 3 years for this development of the GovTech space in Europe. I mean, in 2018 is when we see governments such as Poland, that is today with us, and Lithuania starting to think about these GovTech labs in their institutions. Also recently Luxembourg, and also to add to this list, Spain, because Spain announced in June that they will be creating a GovTech lab in the national level. We have seen also in these last 3 years a lot of institutions in the local and regional level investing in GovTech, maybe with smaller programs, trying open innovation programs and creating their challenges and piloting small things, maybe not in so big systematic way, but doing very interesting things. We can see that in Spain, of course, that we've been promoting this, and in Germany and France. And also in these last 3 years, we have seen how private institutions are also investing in this space. I mean, of course, public, they have been leading this space for many years, but also some universities and little by little investors. So now, as you said, with the pandemic, the truth is that what we are seeing is that the interest for GovTech is increasing a lot. And I will say for 3 simple factors that all we know, but the first one, of course, that we have seen very, very clear the pain points of our institutions. So there are not more excuses. The second thing is to think that, and I think that this is the most important factor, is that people working in public institutions, they realize that they have to do things differently. And this is an amazing incentive for change. And I would say that the most important one. And the third thing is that there is money. to do different things. And this is important as well to think that GovTech is very aligned with all these funds of reconstruction, recovering and reconstruction for European that we are listening to from the European Union. So the goals are very aligned. So there is going to be a lot of money to invest in this space. This new approach from public institutions, it's clear as well for startups and scale-ups. As Daniel said before, what we are seeing is that in this year, many startups and scale-ups that were working in other spaces or other markets, now they are interested in this GovTech space. I want to bring an example. Electronic ID is a startup from Madrid, from Spain. They used to work mostly with banks, and they were, well, it was a fintech company. Well, during the pandemic, they won a huge tender from the government of France, from the Social Security. So it's great to see a Spanish startup winning a big contract from the government of France. And this is happening in the pandemic. In terms of investors, to be honest, I can't say that I see a wave of investors willing to invest in GovTech yet, but I have clearly seen a real interest in knowing about this market. So in my experience, the last 3 months at least, I have been talking with a lot of investors that they come to us to know about this GovTech space, about this B2G model. So that's super interesting to see as well. So just in summary, in these 5 minutes, I would say, first, there is a lot of experience. I mean, so this GovTech thing is not new for member states. So there is a lot of experience in Europe. We have to leverage that experience from local and regional and national level. Second thing, because of the pandemic, I see a lot of experience, interest. I mean, I see an alignment in interest from government, from startups, and also from investors. And that's not very common. So I think that that's important to take advantage of it. And as a third point, I totally agree with Daniel in the sense that I think that there is a comparative advantage in Europe to be a GovTech global hub for the world. So I think that today is the moment to think about how we are going to invest together to promote and take advantage of this opportunity. So we can talk about this and this forward looking. I know that we're going to have a conversation about it. So I put it in the table and so looking forward to discuss it.
Great. Thank you so much, Idoia. I indeed see that pandemic has accelerated some of the processes, also for the better. And I'm wondering how to make some of these changes permanent, right? I think this is one of the biggest challenges. But turning to both Arune and Antoni, you both run national GovTech programs that have been widely recognized as successful. That being said, these are two radically different initiatives, both in size, scope, and approach towards the ecosystem. One may say that GovTech programs come in all flavors, right? This is probably a testament to the diversity of the ecosystem. But I really would want to ask you what makes your programs unique? What is the secret sauce, if you may? Kind of looking if you were to give an advice for someone who was just to establish their own program and looking back at the performance of your programs over the last couple of years, what do you think, what was it that made it what it is today? Arune, maybe you would want to go first.
Thank you, and thanks so much for having me here. I think maybe I wouldn't agree with the statement that it's a secret sauce, because I think in the GovTech community and like CivTech community, we've been quite like open with each other, and at least me myself before setting up the GovTech lab, I had calls with GovTech Polska, with Daniel, with so many other people in the ecosystem that really helped to understand, you know, what are the best practices, what are the mistakes that they made, and so on. But I think the key lesson that I've learned, that our team learned over the last years, has been to actually adapt the processes or the teams that you're creating to the maturity of your ecosystem. So if you see very, like, I don't know, an example of a program that you think works very well, it will not necessarily work very well in your country. And that's what we see, what we saw when we started in Lithuania, because we really like the GovTech Polska approach of design contests, for instance, and we checked our procurement laws and everything kind of fits, and this is so much excitement, we can do it, and no organization wants to commit to actually be the first one to try it out. Although the sums might be very small and so on. And only now, like a month ago, after a year of convincing, we have the first actually design contest launch, and there's a deadline actually in 4 days if anyone is interested. But so I think that's important to recognize, like the maturity and then the specific context of your ecosystem. So that's why, for instance, we didn't at the beginning, we didn't start with saying, now let's everyone do like design contests or innovation partnerships, because there was not a single innovation partnership done in Lithuania at that time. So we build the process that it's more based on like market consultation, and something that we can convince public sector officials to start doing, that we can create a process that they trust. It's a bit out of their comfort zone, but not too much out of their comfort zone, so they don't want to even commit. And I think that has been a key in trying to involve as many stakeholders and as many public sector organizations as possible. And I think another bit, which sometimes is difficult to manage, but we have focused on both, on public sector and on startups. So kind of having these two separate we have some KPIs that are related more to the startups and how we can engage them, how we can accelerate them, but also how we can, for instance, do more of a like training for public sector officials and so on. So I think it's essential. You don't necessarily have to cover both, but it's important then to know that there is someone in the ecosystem that will cover that, because otherwise, you can have as many like very good startups as you can in your market, but if there's no one in the public sector to actually buy that, there's going to be that feeling of disappointment, and very quickly these startups will turn to other markets. And very similarly, if you have public sector officials ready to buy innovative solutions, but there's no one in the market that want to create that will lead to disappointment as well. So I think it's very important when working and creating especially new initiatives, just look at your ecosystem. What kind of players do you have? Like, I think in Spain, you have way more, and you have like even not from the public sector, but from education, you have from academia, you have a lot of mature kind of players. And in Lithuania, what we saw, that there was kind of no one working on this. So we had to kind of adapt to that. So I think this one overall kind of lesson, or the secret, not so secret sauce, is that like it's a bit cliche, but just we really, really need to understand the context and the maturity of your ecosystem, and then build processes around that, because there's no point in having very neat looking processes that no one is going to use and no one is going to be interested in.
Thank you so much, Arune. Over to you, Antoni. I'm wondering, kind of picking where Arune left, right? The importance of having the pipeline. I think in one of our conversations, you also mentioned, I remember, that you had some reflections on the level of intervention of GovTech programs that works very well. So maybe you could speak to that. Is it the central, is it the regional, or the cities? What is the specificity of the program in Poland in that context?
Right. So thank you, Maciej, and all the hosts for having me today. So as Arune said, as Idoia said, it's really is dependent on our actions and on the demand of the public institutions for innovation. Just to give you the overview of how important and how big of a stimulus all those procurement actions can be for innovation. In Poland, the procurement market size is about 50 billion euros. And this is more than the entire EU's venture industry. This is also, and interestingly, the average number of bids is 3. and we are far from the bottom of the list when it comes to EU countries. So, what I'm trying to say here is that there is a massive potential for a lot of those to go to creators of innovation, whether they be software, whether they be hardware, whether they be procedural innovation, whether they be just basically any part of national government, national economy, which just helps contribute to building this ecosystem on. Interestingly, there's absolutely zero obstacles for that to be the case, for that to go to startups. We thought initially that the law might be at fault. This is what we've been told repeatedly, banging our head against some of the doors, but it really isn't. It's definitely and most certainly isn't. We've been there, we tried that. This is absolutely the case. Arune and Daniel before mentioned some of our design contests. We didn't invent any of this. We just read and were looking for a way to do something rather than not to do something, and that's really all the secret there is to that. But so again, it works. If for some reason doesn't work for your particular GovTech ecosystem, do innovation partnership, do competitive dialogues, or just do a grant program. It will also work. It's not optimal, but also work. But answering your question, there's also one other thing that is very important. You asked how to make those changes in government permanent, and we are on a European level conference, so the answer is very simple, and probably most of the viewers also will know what I mean. The old financial perspective was set up in 2013, 2014, which is way before GovTech even became a thing in most countries, at least. We all had digital programs, some of us had digital ministries, but none of us really had a full-blown GovTech initiative or GovTech program. Now we're able to fix this, to make amends and plan anew, really, because at this very moment we're designing, or actually we're pretty much finished designing, the structure and the methodology of spending the funds from the new EU perspective, from the recovery fund, from all those stimuli which have been provided to us, and which are perfect for exactly designed to stimulate the innovation, including digital innovation. But the important thing is not how much, because we all know that's not creative. The important thing is how. We know there's a requirement for 20% of those funds to go to digital transformation, and countries can do it differently though. And some decide to do it, distribute the money between different components. One of them would be digital transformation, and that's it. And what we think works much better, and it's actually pretty much essential for a successful GovTech transformation, is that we drop this mindset of digitization being a separate government sector, of digitization or the general digital innovation, GovTech, you call it however you want, but of this being a government branch, just like diplomacy or infrastructure or fisheries or whatever else. But it's really not. It is a cross-sectional thing, which is supposed to be the bedrock for all the other branches to provide their services to citizens. So whether this be ways to pay taxes online, this is also GovTech, but it has nothing to do with traditionally understood e-government. It is a very domain-specific service. And it requires collaboration from the people responsible for this particular service. So it's not something that can be fixed by a certain unit or an agency or one of many institutions, be it on a regional level or be it on a central level. So this is why the Polish GovTech ecosystem was set up in the Polish Prime Minister's office, where I currently am, and this is because this is really the center of government, and there's no clash of competence in any way. On the contrary, actually, our job is practically to be the sort of consulting hub, really, for everyone else in government, to who would like to improve their processes, but they either don't have the skill set or they just haven't thought of it. To use digital innovation, especially digital innovation obtained from small companies and startups. So our job is not to do digitization for others. It is to advise and assist them in bringing those innovation to their own spaces. Finally, this supply managing, because we can fix demand. So the VC market is growing. There are certain funds set up. We have the design contests. We have all those inspirations we gathered from other countries like Arune and Lithuania. But the thing that is actually necessary, this is a fuel powering this whole thing to set it up, is really demand. And demand happens only when public institutions have the necessary skill set and have the means to think a bit outside of the box and think not just how to improve my process, but also how can digital technology help in that. This is really it. I mean, the whole thing, our whole approach is directed at making sure that the government works as a whole, as a sort of a central and coordinated entity, which then is able to slowly but surely rethink the whole way they think about their processes, and then naturally, by definition, if they turn towards digital technologies more, then there will be more opportunities for startups and other innovation providers to participate. Just to conclude this whole thing, I would just say that it's not really a secret sauce. It's more like salt. I mean, every country has this in their soil, in earth. But it does make dishes taste a bit better. But there is absolutely no obstacle for anyone to just dig it up and use it. And this is something that we did, and we encourage others to do, because it's it's on a technical level, it's just simple to do. It's more of the question of deciding to do it.
I like Antoni, what you mentioned, how the metaphor of this element, this earthly element that everyone has to uncover on their own. It kind of ties into this notion that innovation is context specific and culture specific, right? And it really brings me to the next question that I have for Robyn. Because Robyn, you've managed to build a knowledge sharing platform that is being fondly used by civil servants around the world. And already in this session, we've heard from Arune how important it is to cultivate peer learning opportunities and how unique GovTech ecosystem is in this context, as it is really built from the ground up and there is no secrecy, etc., etc. But on the other hand, there is this question of salt, right? So this seems to be, this knowledge sharing, horizontal knowledge sharing seems to be quite a daunting task because innovation is context specific and you can't really just copy paste things from one context to another. So I'm wondering, what are some of the learnings from running Apolitical that you could share? What could be useful for anyone who would want to incentivize and kind of pushing, and anyone who would want to push European GovTech ecosystem into a brighter future?
It's a daunting task, but it's such a necessary one. And I want to just take a step back ahead of answering your question directly to give a sense of the scale of the problem. McKinsey did a calculation a few years back that if governments, whether at the national level or the city level, just did what was already working, so this is no new innovation, it's just the status quo of best practice. If they just did what was already working elsewhere, it would unlock $3.5 trillion a year in cost savings or value creation for society. So that's the prize of getting just the bread and butter of knowledge sharing in government right. Obviously, if you add an innovation layer to that, you unlock a whole lot more value. Now, the problem, as we understand it, that underpins that kind of has a few parts. The first that knowledge has been siloed and disconnected. It's sat in people's heads, in departments, servers, or sometimes buried in databases. The World Bank has released their own data showing that 1/3 of their reports are never downloaded a single time. Those are reports that have a lot of knowledge, a lot of money goes into them. So that's one part of the problem, the siloing and the disorganization. But the next and perhaps more substantial one is that knowledge has tended to be very theoretical, rather than being connected to the practical realities of getting things done on the ground. And that's often where the translation piece falls apart, where you don't accommodate a specific local consideration or system. The way to get around that is to move that knowledge from 2-dimensional knowledge, just about theory, to 3-dimensional knowledge, which is connected to the people who've worked on projects. So that's what we're obsessed with at Apolitical. How do you both organize information, bring it together, but then also create a community layer around it? So if you're pioneering a new GovTech lab, you can not only read about what worked elsewhere in Europe or indeed somewhere else in the world, but then you can talk to the people behind it and they can say, look, this is what was particular to our local situation. This is what's global or relevant European-wide. And then you're much less likely to fall into those local contextualization traps. And I think that community aspect has been behind the adoption and great feedback we've got for Apolitical. We are now used by about 115,000 policymakers in 170 different countries. And there's real appetite for sharing. Since COVID in particular, last year we held 63 online conversations to which 60,000 different public servants signed up. So huge desire to connect with communities to be more effective. And all our knowledge and our courses, we've just introduced online courses, are always connected to the practical insights of people who've worked on problems. I just want to finish by making a comment on COVID and how that's changed things, because it's come up so many times. We polled our membership about 3 months into COVID and asked them what their greatest concerns were. And we got a quite surprising set of answers. The top concern wasn't a surprise, that was protecting vulnerable people. But the second highest concern out of a long list of worries that public servants might have was, how do we preserve the positive changes that the pandemic have brought about in government? And I think principal amongst those are the ability to do things quickly and bravely, which is super relevant to the GovTech challenge. And Anton said earlier that they didn't invent anything. They were just looking for ways to do something rather than not to do something. Now, historically in government, it's always been safer not to do something. COVID, I think, has shown that it's often more dangerous not to do something, and the safer route is to do something. And that's such an exciting inversion of opinion for the GovTech ecosystem, because GovTech companies, the GovTech moment, are designed to enable the doing something of important, tackling important new challenges quickly and at lower cost. So we still have a long way to go. There's still a lot of reticence, all the things discussed already about needing to build community, needing to fix procurement, all of those are true. But I think the attitudinal shift that COVID has produced by showing what's possible at speed is going to pay dividends for a long time. And there's this really important window of opportunity for the community around GovTech to come together and seize it, to, as you know, Daniel set out the various things that need to happen, which I agree with, but that ranges from changing procurement to upskilling the public servants who are leading departmental transformations. There's a whole shopping list, and we need to get on the case quickly.
Thank you, Robyn. This is excellent. I really do indeed agree with what you said about the window of opportunity, right? Not only there's been really a change of attitudes due to COVID as a kind of positive unintended consequence of COVID, but there is also what has been mentioned earlier, a new financial perspective that really can help change things for the better if the funding is spent wisely by the member states. We have some time for a discussion, and I think this is one of those rare opportunities where we have a lot of European officials in a room. So I'd like to take this opportunity to discuss how member states could be supported better by the EU level, by European Commission and other entities. I'm wondering whether you have some impressions around this question. Arune, would you want to give it a go, or maybe Antoni?
Sure, I can start. I think, I mean, we had this discussion as well with you before, but there's definitely a role to play for the EU as well, and I think Antoni might expand a bit later on if he expands on what they're doing. But I think it's what we see is that sometimes public sector officials just need that kind of confirmation from above, if you will, so that this is the right process to use, or this this kind of company is a key company to engage with, and so on. And sometimes you have like central governments that are able to provide that and are able to find ways to provide that assurance, but to make sure that the GovTech is European, like that it's more European market, not just national markets. I think then the EU could act as that kind of providing, like, from very simple steps of just sharing the best practices and saying, yeah, this aligns the way that, like, Poland, for instance, does design contests, aligns with actually the regulation and the European public procurement regulation, or to more concrete steps that are kind of providing assurances that this is you're not going to be penalized for this, because that kind of maybe follows up from what was said before around that there's the first initial kind of the step is not to do something rather than do something, and that comes from a lot of because the kind of risks are not, and taking risks is not rewarded, but every time, if you do something good, that's fine and no one says anything, and then if it doesn't go that well, then you have a lot of kind of negative feedback, and that creates that desire to avoid any risks that might result in having that negative feedback, either from your institution, from media, and so on. So giving trust, like, and assurances to the processes, to the GovTech startups, that's definitely maybe something that the EU can work on and develop this area that sometimes central governments are not able to cover.
Antoni, would you want to elaborate on that?
Yeah, I mean, I'll try to be as frank as possible here. So we, out of all those members of this panel, we all talked to each other before. We all messaged. We are familiar with each other's work, and draw lessons from each other. And I think that's splendid. But I did mention the new perspective and the funding, and this is obviously splendid and will be a huge boost to innovation and digital policy, etc. But the one thing which I think isn't really too creative, to be fair, but is something which is the case, is that in many countries, the issues, as I said, the supply of idea, the demand for ideas. Sorry, so the demand for those creative solutions, digital policy, for doing things differently, etc. And again, as I said, one of the main missions of institutions such as mine is to encourage and stimulate and provide this demand for innovation. Now, the one thing which motivates pretty much every institution in the country is if some idea, be it very vague and broad, but in any context, is considered to be supported by a European entity or a European body, or in any way, us being able to say that what we do is not just a crazy idea of a few people gathered in the PM's office, which and we just make it up. And rather than that, to be able to say that we are actually coordinating this on the European level, and this is something which is an initiative which, in principle, is agreed upon and is something which is deemed generally worth it by people other than ourselves. This is already a major boost for this demand driving, because again, the EU has a tremendous authority in terms of innovation support. So that's obviously one thing. The other thing, again, this is probably not overly creative, but there are things which we actually can do together. There are things which we have worked on. Some of the tools we build can absolutely be expanded to other EU member states, because again, procurement is regulated on a central level, on a pan-European level, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that the two main things is some sort of formal way to conduct those discussions that we're having anyway informally, but to be able to actually say that we're doing this is one thing, and the other thing is for us, GovTech institutions to be able to just think about what can be done together, which will then be used not in one country, not in two countries, but will be made available to everyone in the EU, because there are quite a few tools that absolutely can. So that would be it.
This is great. Picking up where you left, Idoia, I know that you've worked on a city level, right, with the city of Madrid. Maybe you could shed some light on how this kind of collaboration, this level of collaboration, may be different from what we've heard, right? Cities, I think, well, on one hand, there's of course naturally a lot of focus on the member states, because this is how the funding is channeled, this is where political power is stored, and this is how majority of GovTech programs have originated, right? But I find cities to be particularly interesting and important, because it seems to me that majority of 21st century challenges are really kind of omnipresent in the context of the cities, right? So kind of looking from migration to future of work to public health, these are all issues that we see and interact with on a kind of daily basis in the context of cities, right? And then on the other hand, the rollout of emerging technologies is usually done in the context of cities. So this is also a kind of field of experimentation where citizens could really see how the future of public space will look like, right? So I'm wondering, from your experiences, do you have any reflections on this space?
No, of course, and thank you so much for the question, because I really think that in the future of GovTech in Europe, cities and regions are going to have a key role for this development. Absolutely. I mean, we work mostly with cities, and it hasn't been a strategy. It has been we end up working with them because of a reason, right? And I would like to explain a little bit what we do, because maybe it's difficult to understand the role of a university in this space. Basically, what we saw, we started from my university 3 years ago working on GovTech. And what we realized, and actually our first idea was creating an accelerator program for working with the startups and help them to go to governments and try to do new things, right? But the truth is that we realized that the demand on GovTech in Spain was not there. I mean, there was no demand. So we decided to pivot and to create a program to help institutions to try GovTech. Because GovTech is complicated. I mean, Antoni said at the beginning, I mean, technically it's not complicated, but you touch everything. And you touch the organizations, procurement, cultures, innovation, you touch everything. So we decided to make some open innovation programs on GovTech for institutions in general. We end up working almost with cities, as I said. To give you some numbers, last year we worked with more than 14 cities, mostly in the region of Madrid, but also in the Basque Country. We pilot we did 8 challenges and we ran 8 pilots. So always with cities. Why I think that cities are great dimension, the urban dimension is great for GovTech. Basically, I would say for 3 things. First one, as you said, there's a natural concentration of innovation in cities. So it's kind of near to the institution of the municipalities. I mean, if you see the example of Startup in Residence in San Francisco, it was I would say the first program from a municipality working on GovTech. And why? In San Francisco, next to Silicon Valley, it was kind of the same. You can see in the cities that there is a lot of innovation surrounding you, but no innovation is coming to inside you, right? So that's first, the concentration of innovation that you have in cities. Second, that what we see is that if you want to reach with a new idea to public official, it's easier to do it in a local level than in a regional or national level. And this is important when you come with new ideas. And what I see as well, and this is my opinion, no data behind this, but what I have seen is that the incentives from cities to innovate are much better because the challenges are much better, much bigger, and they are in that last mile next to the citizen, right? So they have much more pressure to do things and change things. So that incentives is also important. So yes, we see that, and actually we haven't mentioned here, but the last 3 years, as I was saying, we have seen like big labs in national level, but again, a lot of cities trying open innovation program and small projects on GovTech, maybe because of the funding and everything. Now with what we have seen that's a change in the pandemic also. We used to work small programs with cities. Now they don't ask us for the small program, they are asking us for the lab. So it's a nice change as well.
Very interesting. So I think what we've heard today, and this is not entirely unsurprising to me, but maybe surprising to some, is that regulations and funding, procurement, these are not the biggest obstacles. These are not the biggest problems. Our discussion has really revolved around culture and practices and really the willingness to share knowledge and get something done. So I think, and this is something that I would want to ask the entire panel, each of you. I think a still question to be asked is, how do we make sure that these practices that really changed under pressure of the pandemic, how do we make sure that they stay with us, right? How do we make sure that whatever we have achieved really becomes a best practice for the times of peace, not only for the times of war? And most importantly, how do we then make sure that these practices are not only a part of a avant-garde boutique part of a government, but they spread around and become enmeshed within public administrations? Robyn, maybe you would want to start.
Sure. So such an important question. And I think it starts with telling the stories of what's worked and showcasing the people behind them. We have to create champions and heroes in this ecosystem. It's kind of antithetical to the way government traditionally works, where you have quiet bureaucrats, but for innovation and risk-taking and courage and new ideas to spread, you have to show how that's been done. So I'm biased, obviously, because this is our whole model, but I think share those stories to start with, and please come and share them on Apolitical. We like promoting the great work of policymakers and public servants and telling the stories of the people behind them. So that's a starting point. And then I think just a willingness from countries to lean in and try stuff whilst we've got this momentum. We've now got a whole spectrum of ideas to pick from, many of which have been stimulated and accelerated during the pandemic. We just have to get moving and try some of those. And some of them are going to work and some of them aren't. That's the game of innovation, but we have to start by trying.
Perfect. Antoni.
Right. So obviously a super important question. And I think I did refer to this a bit before, but I guess just to reiterate, the first thing is to use the opportunity we currently have, because this is the moment when we're planning much of the distribution of basically what will determine the whole year of digital decade. I mean, this is not an empty term. This is something which we're all striving for. So use up what we're doing right now. That's one thing. Second thing, drop this idea of digital and innovation being a separate branch of government. It really isn't. It's just an integral part of every branch of government. And the third bit is just to really reach out. I mean, it's that simple. We all come up with ideas. Everyone who's sitting here, everyone who's speaking, and many others as well. This GovTech series is really not this big in terms of the people who are involved in it. So we're always happy to be reached out to. We're always happy to talk. We're always happy to exchange ideas. And I think just riffing off to what Daniel said in the lead up to this panel is this is where I think the Polish and European industry and economy can really shine on the global stage. So let's just use it. Let's just talk to each other.
Right. Arune.
I think I'd like to emphasize two things. So from one side, it's definitely that people usually they lead that change, but what we've seen in Lithuania is there was very few key people that a lot of change relied on, and then it's a bit scary that you think, okay, they might just change their job, and who is then going to lead that change. So I think once you share those stories on Apolitical and elsewhere, try to think how can you make sure that these the things that were done can be like institutionalized, if you will. Like how can you make sure that it's not it's not up to them, like it shouldn't be up to the few people in the government to actually lead this change. It has to, they have to have that institutional support. So I think that's necessary because in Lithuania definitely has relied on a few people, that kind of a lot of change that has happened. And I think similarly, we saw a lot of public sector institutions turn to startups when they need these out-of-the-box solutions. And I think kind of remembering, they at that point, they did very clearly understand, we didn't need to pitch them, that they might have out-of-the-box solutions. And there is a bit of a now change, like there is a kind of trying to go back again. And I think it's important for them to kind of remember, in that situation, they were able to deliver out-of-the-box solutions. They didn't just offer, they were able to deliver it. And, just give a benefit of a doubt, if you will, like the next time as well. And we're like in Lithuania because one of the universities is actually doing research trying to understand what were the key elements in innovation in the public sector in Lithuania during COVID. So hopefully, I mean, after they completed their analysis and research, we'll have some data around that as well to make decisions.
Right, Idoia?
Well, actually, sorry, but it's great to see that Arune, it says there are many universities in Europe working in this space. So that's a great sign as well. So I would say three things, like three different things. First, I mean, we need a clear narrative from the European Commission and the member countries, a narrative that said to the market, we want to try, we want to buy. And that's fundamental. If you don't have that, you don't have GovTech ecosystem, you don't have GovTech market in Europe. So that's first. The second thing that I would say is that this is not a bilateral relation between startups and governments. This is more about the ecosystem. So we need investors, we need universities, we need big corporations willing to go for tendering processes with small companies and so on. So if we want to have this sustainable, we need to understand this as ecosystem. The third thing, very in line with the Antoni comments, I mean, we need to understand GovTech as a transformational tool for governments. So it has to be in the national plans in the strategies and so on. This is not about creating a GovTech lab, it's about many policies and changes and procedures. And finally, just an ask for the European Commission, because we can think out of the box, we can be like super creative and so on, but the European Commission can promote tools for pre-procurement spaces where our institutions can evaluate, and afterwards they will buy at the scale with the tendering process and so on. But that piece of pre-procurement tool for trying things and have budget for trying things, it's absolutely fundamental for this space, I think. So those are my final ideas, and thank you so much.
Thank you, Idoia. We are running against the clock, but there is one question from the audience that I wanted to highlight. Daniel has mentioned in his introduction something that we all know, right? That how public procurement processes really put a preference on larger players. And a question from the audience is whether any of you could provide an example when GovTech program has really empowered a European AI company, maybe on a smaller side of things. So kind of just to trying to understand whether there's really some good examples of implementations that would put in favorable position smaller players. Can you take us for that question?
So if there are none, then I might be the one. So yeah, just one example we have from our own backyard. So as you know, Poland houses an external border of the EU on the eastern border, but as well the northern border from the Baltic Sea. And this means that we're also in charge of protecting those borders from contraband and smugglers and all those illicit trafficking. And one of the issues we have with this is that this means that each year we have about 300 million containers crossing our external border through sea, through train, through car. To ensure the security, we need to X-ray scan them. So we need to scan them with those big machines, and they provide an X-ray image, and then people who know how to do it look at the photographs, and then they make deductions whether they are illegal cigarettes or people or drugs or anything which would be illegal to smuggle into the EU. And now, one of the things we did in one of our founding projects really was we found, what is the reason that a machine, an algorithm, cannot detect those items for us? And so instead of minutes, it could take literally splits of seconds to scan those, which would then mean that the wait time at the border will be much shorter, not to mention that probably the efficiency will also rise. We did, not going into too much detail because I know there are other questions as well, but we did conduct one of our contests The outcome of this was that a Polish startup, which now exports solutions all over the planet, did win it, did implement it, and now it all serves the citizens all across the Polish external border.
Thank you, Antoni. Excellent. And with this answer, we are drawing this session to the close sharply on time. Thank you so much all for speaking, for attending. This has been really interesting, but obviously this is one of many conversations that we will have to take elsewhere. Thank you so much, and back to the studio.
Much. Just a little bit peeking behind the curtain there and what's going on in GovTech. So thank you very much, Maciej. Well moderated, giving us a little bit of a break. We much appreciate it. We're going to go now and have a quick look at a video just to give you a little bit more of a rounded insight and break up the rhythm a little bit. So cue the video. Here we go.
Governments are in the driving seat when it comes to public sector innovation. But the private sector also has a part to play. Enter GovTech.
GovTech has a number of connotations. One of it clearly is that you bring companies closer to the public sector, in particular small, innovative companies and startups. Those who play around to test out new technologies in order to improve public services, in order to improve participation of people and communities in the public cause. That's what we see as GovTech.
We are witnessing the rise of different technologies, such as artificial intelligence, ever-increasing computing capabilities, or the exponential potential of large cloud infrastructures. These present a massive opportunity to improve public services in the EU. New technology also means new business, and companies have a role to play in procuring new technological services to the public sector. But how to ensure that smaller market players get a chance to play a part in this transformation?
Every year, governments around the world spend about $13 trillion procuring from the private sector, but most of this still goes to just a handful of giant private sector companies. At the same time, innovative programs have shown that it doesn't have to be the case.
Because today there is a certain barrier. Very often, if you're a small company, but you have great ideas and a lot of passion and a lot of energy working in your area, still it is difficult to get, for example, contracts with public administrations.
What can the public sector do to balance this relationship and to harness the power of private sector innovation? It can regulate, fostering cross-border and cross-sector collaboration in the EU. It can offer open standards and solutions to avoid vendor lock-in and encourage interoperability. And it can transform procurement, giving a chance to SMEs and other small European-based players to get involved.
Procurement is absolutely essential. Reforming, modernizing, also experimenting with procurement is absolutely important. For the public sector, certainty, safety, accountability have always been prime. On the other hand, we should pay attention that we don't find ourselves in a straitjacket, where in the end we cannot embark in this sort of innovation cooperation that we would like between the best small, most agile small startups and traditional public sector entities.
I am optimistic that the need to restart economies after COVID will encourage governments to use this enormous lever they have around putting procurement dollars into smaller companies to do just that.
Engaging with the private sector is absolutely crucial for innovation. This is why the CEF and ISA² programs launched the Digital Innovation Challenge, a co-creation exercise for startups and SMEs to understand how the Commission's reusable solutions can support private sector innovation.
The Digital Innovation Challenge was an invitation to small innovative companies across Europe and startups to discover and reuse some of the solutions that the EU has been developing on behalf of European public service. For example, particular pieces of code or semantic assets that I can use as a company when I build services for other public administrations in Europe.
Closer collaboration between the public and private sector has resulted in exciting emerging technologies that are changing the way governments work.
One of my absolute favorite examples, and we have so many of them on Apolitical, is New Zealand running a pilot to make all its legislation machine readable. And this has a few big benefits. For example, it makes it much easier for the public sector to predict the effect of new regulations, thereby avoiding costly mistakes. So a very, very exciting domain of experimentation. But then there's just a host of others. Sensor technologies make it much easier for cities to be more efficient, to offer services in the right places. Predictive analytics using big data is allowing public institutions to allocate services in the future. Queensland's got a really innovative program around hospital admissions, which has allowed it to save a lot of money. That's just to name a few.
Looking ahead, the Digital Europe programme will continue looking for next-generation solutions and components for the public sector and collaborating with private players.
The relationship goes both ways. The public sector is also critical in fostering private sector innovation in a few different ways, by funding early-stage R&D, by providing economic and regulatory incentives to support an innovative economy and to help kickstart important new markets, and by regulating monopolies that could otherwise crush small companies.
Two sides of the story. Use the tools that we have developed that are available for you, reuse for everybody. And on the other hand, come closer to us so that we can start experimenting how we best work together. The public sector and the private sector, small innovative companies and startups across Europe.
We are working to make our lives better. Will you be a part of this journey?